Hi, I'm Rebecca. 2 weeks ago, I found my 8-month-old daughter Emma convulsing in her nursery after drinking formula my own sister had prepared. While I was screaming for help, Charlotte stood in the doorway with this cold, calculating smile and whispered, "Maybe now you'll understand what real heartbreak feels like." What she didn't know was that my husband Jake wasn't just any Coast Guard officer. His father, Admiral William Harrison, commanded the entire Pacific Coast Guard fleet and happened to be worth over $2 billion from his maritime shipping empire. When that emergency call reached Admiral Harrison during Emma's life-or-death surgery, the room went silent. What happened next didn't just end Charlotte's life as she knew it. It exposed a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of pharmaceutical crime. By dawn, my sister was begging federal agents to explain why she'd destroyed the one person who'd always protected her. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The salt air of Monterey Bay carried a different kind of chill that October morning as I sat in Emma's nursery at 4 a.m., watching her tiny chest rise and fall in the pale light of her seahorse nightlight. She'd been restless all week, rejecting her bottles and crying with a sound that seemed to pierce straight through to my soul. I'd called Dr. Peterson 3 times, but she kept reassuring me it was probably just a developmental phase, maybe some minor reflux. "First-time mother anxiety," she'd said with that patient smile pediatricians reserve for worried parents. "Completely normal." I should have trusted my instincts. Our house sat perched on the cliffs overlooking the Pacific, a wedding gift from Jake's father when we'd married 18 months ago. Admiral William Harrison hadn't just given us a house, he'd given us a fortress. Smart home technology, state-of-the-art security systems, and a view that stretched to the horizon where Coast Guard cutters moved like white specks against the endless blue. It was the kind of place where a young family should feel safe, protected by both technology and the infinite ocean that had shaped the Harrison family legacy for generations. Jake had been at sea for 3 weeks, commanding a search and rescue operation off the Washington coast that had stretched longer than anyone anticipated. The Coast Guard didn't operate on family schedules, and as the son of a legendary admiral, Jake carried expectations that went beyond normal duty requirements. Every mission was a chance to prove he'd earned his position through merit, not family connections. Every decision was scrutinized not just by his superiors, but by a father whose reputation in maritime circles was almost mythical. But isolation had never bothered me before Emma was born. I'd grown up as an only child until my parents adopted Charlotte when I was 12 and she was 8. My mother had always said we needed to help children who didn't have families, and Charlotte had seemed like such a sweet, quiet girl who just needed love and stability. What we didn't realize was that some people are broken in ways that love can't fix. The neighborhood around us was filled with military families who understood the rhythm of deployments and homecomings. Captain Sandra Martinez next door had been through 6 deployments with her Navy husband, and she had this wonderful way of checking on me without making it feel like charity. Sometimes I'd find fresh-baked bread on my doorstep, or she'd text to ask if I needed anything from the commissary. It was the kind of community that made the loneliness manageable. But family, that was different. Family could cut deeper than any stranger ever could. Charlotte had appeared at my door that Tuesday morning, driving her gleaming white Tesla up the winding coastal road like she owned it. She stepped out wearing what I'd come to think of as her uniform, a perfectly tailored designer dress that probably cost more than most people's rent, heels that clicked against stone with authority, and that smile she'd perfected during her rise through the pharmaceutical industry. My sister had always been beautiful in a way that made other women feel invisible, even as children. While I had been the quiet one who buried herself in books and dreamed of becoming a marine biologist, Charlotte was the one who commanded attention without trying. She dated the captain of the swim team, earned a full scholarship to Stanford, and landed a 6-figure pharmaceutical sales job before she turned 25. The contrast between us had never felt sharper than it did that morning, standing in my doorway wearing yoga pants and a milk-stained shirt, while she looked like she'd stepped off the cover of a business magazine. "You look exhausted, Becca," she said, brushing past me into the foyer without waiting for an invitation. Her perfume, something expensive and sophisticated, filled the space between us. "When's the last time you actually slept through the night?" I closed the door behind me, already feeling that familiar knot forming in my stomach. Charlotte had this talent for making observations that sounded like concern, but felt like accusations. Emma's been fussy lately. I haven't been sleeping much. She set her leather briefcase on the marble counter and looked around the living room with an expression I recognized from childhood. Polite interest mixed with barely concealed judgment. Still no word from Jake? He calls when he can. You know how it is with Coast Guard operations. Communications are limited when they're conducting search and rescue missions.
Right. The heroic husband who's never around when you actually need him. She settled onto the couch with practiced elegance, crossing her legs like she was posing for a photograph. Must be nice having a husband who gets to play maritime hero while you're stuck here changing diapers and dealing with sleepless nights alone. The comment hit exactly where she'd aimed it. Jake wasn't playing hero. He was saving lives, leading missions that brought people home to their families. But explaining that to Charlotte was like trying to describe color to someone who insisted the world existed only in black and white. She'd never understood duty, sacrifice, or putting something bigger than yourself first. "He's doing important work," I said quietly, walking over to where Emma was playing in her bouncer near the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the bay. Even at 8 months old, there was something alert and intelligent in her gaze that reminded me so much of Jake. She'd inherited his strong jawline and my green eyes, and when she smiled, it was like watching sunrise over the ocean. "Important work," Charlotte repeated, like the words tasted bitter. "You know what's important work, Rebecca? Taking care of yourself. You look like you haven't seen the inside of a spa in months. When's the last time you had a real conversation with another adult, or went anywhere besides the grocery store?" I wanted to defend myself, to list all the ways I was managing perfectly fine. The bills were paid, Emma was healthy and developing beautifully, the house was clean enough. But something in Charlotte's tone made me pause. There was an edge there I hadn't heard before, something sharper than her usual condescension. "I'm managing fine," I said, but my voice sounded smaller than I intended. "Are you?" She leaned forward, her voice dropping to that tone she used when she was about to deliver unwelcome news to her pharmaceutical clients. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're drowning, and that baby is going to suffer for it." The words hung in the air like smoke. Emma gurgled happily in her bouncer, reaching for a stuffed dolphin that dangled just out of her grasp. She was perfect. Every pediatric checkup had confirmed it. Meeting all her milestones, gaining weight appropriately, developing her motor skills ahead of schedule. Dr. Peterson had consistently praised her progress. "Emma is fine," I said, but even I could hear the uncertainty creeping into my voice. "Is she?" Charlotte walked over to where my daughter was playing, her heels clicking against the hardwood floors. She looked down at Emma with an expression I couldn't quite read. "She seems small for 8 months, and you said she's been fussy lately, crying more than usual." "It's just a phase," the doctor said. "Doctors don't know everything, Rebecca. I work with them every day." Charlotte reached down and touched Emma's cheek with one perfectly manicured finger. Emma turned toward the touch instinctively, and Charlotte smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Babies are so fragile, so completely dependent on their mothers to keep them safe. Something cold settled in my chest. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe you need help. Real help." She turned back to me, and for a moment her mask slipped. There was something hungry in her expression, something that made my skin crawl. "I've been thinking about that a lot lately, how isolated you are here, how alone. What would happen if something went wrong, if Emma got sick, if there was an emergency?" "I'd handle it. I'm not helpless, Charlotte." "Aren't you?" The cruelty in her voice was breathtaking. This wasn't sisterly concern or even her usual passive-aggressive commentary. This was something else entirely, something that made every instinct I had scream danger. "You're a scared new mother who hasn't slept in weeks, trying to keep a baby healthy on your own, while your husband plays Coast Guard hero thousands of miles away." "I think you should leave," I said, standing up straighter despite the exhaustion that had settled into my bones like lead. "Oh, I will, but first, let me help." She walked to her briefcase and pulled out a small pharmaceutical bag. I brought some samples from work, new formula supplements designed specifically for fussy babies. The company I represent is about to launch them nationwide, but they're in final clinical trials right now. Very exclusive. She set the bag on the coffee table and pulled out 3 small containers, each labeled with official-looking pharmaceutical stickers and batch numbers. 1 packet mixed into her regular formula should help with the digestive issues, might even help her sleep better, give you some relief. I stared at the containers without moving toward them. I don't want to give Emma anything that hasn't been approved by her doctor. It's just vitamins and probiotics, Rebecca. Completely natural ingredients. But if you'd rather watch your baby suffer because you're too stubborn to accept help from someone who actually knows about infant nutrition... She left the sentence hanging, but the implication was clear. I was being unreasonable, overly cautious, a bad mother who would let her child suffer rather than accept assistance from someone who actually knew about infant nutrition. I'll think about it, I said, though every fiber of my being was screaming not to touch whatever she'd brought into my house. Don't think too long. Babies can develop feeding aversions when they associate eating with discomfort. You could be creating problems that last her entire childhood. She gathered her briefcase and stood, smoothing her dress with practiced efficiency. She kissed my cheek before I could step away, her lips cold against my skin. Take care of yourself, Rebecca, and take care of that baby. She's all you have right now with Jake playing sailor boy. After she left, I stood in my foyer for a long time, listening to the sound of waves crashing against the cliffs below. Emma had fallen asleep in her bouncer, her small chest rising and falling with the steady rhythm that had become my favorite sound in the world. The house felt different somehow, like the air had changed composition while Charlotte had been here. I walked to the coffee table and stared at the containers she'd left behind. They looked legitimate enough, professional labeling, ingredient lists written in small medical print, batch numbers that suggested they'd come from a real pharmaceutical company, but something about them felt wrong. Maybe it was the way Charlotte had presented them, like she was doing me a favor while also making it clear that refusing would be yet another failure on my part. Maybe it was the timing, showing up uninvited just when Emma was having her difficult week. Or maybe it was the look in her eyes when she'd touched Emma's face, like she was calculating something. I picked up one of the containers and read the ingredient list. Most of it was standard: vitamins, minerals, probiotics that I recognized from my pre-med courses in college. But there were a few compounds listed that I didn't recognize, long chemical names that could have been anything. My phone buzzed with a text message, and for a moment my heart leaped, hoping it might be Jake, but it was just Captain Martinez asking if I needed anything from her commissary run. I typed back a quick thanks, but declined, then sat down on the couch and stared at my phone. Jake's last message was from 2 days ago. Missing my girls more than words can say. Tell Emma her daddy loves her. Home soon, beautiful. Stay strong. Home soon. He'd been saying that for 3 weeks now, and I understood why. Coast Guard operations didn't run on family schedules, and search and rescue missions couldn't be abandoned just because a wife was feeling overwhelmed. But the loneliness was eating me alive, and Charlotte's visit had only made it worse. I looked at the formula containers again, then at my sleeping daughter. She was perfect, healthy, maybe a little fussier than usual, but well within the normal range for an 8-month-old. Her weight was good, her development ahead of schedule, her sleep patterns fairly consistent despite the recent rough patch. So why was I even considering using whatever Charlotte had brought? Because she was right about one thing. I was exhausted. Not just physically, though the sleep deprivation was real enough. I was emotionally drained from carrying the full weight of parenthood alone, from making every decision without backup, from second-guessing myself constantly because there was no one there to reassure me that I was doing okay. But that didn't mean I needed to trust Charlotte with my daughter's health. She'd never shown any real interest in Emma before today. She'd visited exactly twice since Emma was born, once in the hospital for 20 minutes and once when Emma was 3 months old, mainly to complain about how crying babies triggered her migraines. She'd never offered to help with anything substantial, never asked about Emma's development or milestones, never even remembered to send a card for Emma's half-birthday. Now, suddenly, she was concerned about Emma's nutrition. The rational thing would be to call Dr. Peterson and ask her opinion, but it was already past office hours, and I knew what she'd say anyway. She'd want to research the compounds, maybe consult with a colleague, probably recommend against using anything that wasn't specifically prescribed for Emma, which is exactly what I should do. But as I reached for my phone to call the doctor's after-hours line, Emma woke up crying. Not her usual hungry cry or tired cry, but something different. Something that sounded almost distressed, like her stomach was hurting in a way that scared her. And that's when I made the decision that would change everything. Preparing and narrating the story took us a lot of time, so if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I tried everything to calm Emma down. Gentle bouncing, soft singing, walking her around the house while she cried with increasing intensity. Nothing worked. Her little face was scrunched up in what looked like genuine pain, and my maternal instincts were screaming that something was seriously wrong. By the time I'd been trying to soothe her for 45 minutes, panic was setting in. This wasn't normal fussy behavior. This was distress. Real distress. I called Dr. Peterson's after-hours line and waited through the automated menu, Emma still crying in my arms with a sound that broke my heart. "The doctor will call you back within an hour," the receptionist said. "If this is a true emergency, please hang up and call 911. I hung up and looked at Emma, whose crying had evolved into an exhausted whimper that somehow sounded worse than the screaming. Was this an emergency? She wasn't running a fever, wasn't showing obvious signs of serious illness, but my instincts were telling me something was terribly wrong. I found myself looking at those containers on the coffee table again. Charlotte had said they were designed specifically for fussy babies with digestive issues. So what if Emma really was in pain and I had something right here that could help her feel better?
"It sounds like she might be going through a growth spurt," Dr. Peterson said with that calm professionalism that usually reassured me. "Sometimes babies get extra fussy when they're developing rapidly. Try some gentle tummy massage, maybe bicycle her legs to help with any gas. If she's still inconsolable in the morning, bring her in for an examination." After we hung up, I tried her suggestions, but Emma continued to fuss. Not screaming anymore, but clearly uncomfortable in a way that made my heart ache. I was running on about 4 hours of sleep from the night before, and my judgment was starting to cloud from exhaustion and worry. That's when I made the decision that nearly cost my daughter her life. I prepared Emma's evening bottle with her usual organic formula, then stood staring at Charlotte's containers for what felt like forever. Finally, I opened one of them and mixed in a small amount, less than half the recommended dose, just to be safe. If it really was just vitamins and probiotics like Charlotte had claimed, it shouldn't hurt anything. And if it helped Emma feel better, maybe we could both get some desperately needed sleep. I tested the temperature, shook the bottle thoroughly to mix everything, and offered it to Emma. She latched on immediately, drinking with the kind of eager hunger that suggested she really had been feeling unwell. Within minutes, she'd finished the entire bottle and was looking more relaxed than she had all day. I burped her gently, changed her diaper, and rocked her in the chair by her bedroom window that overlooked the moonlit Pacific. For the first time in days, she settled quickly, her breathing evening out into the deep rhythm of peaceful sleep. Maybe Charlotte had been right. Maybe I had been too stubborn, too suspicious of help when it was offered. Maybe sometimes accepting assistance wasn't a sign of weakness, but of wisdom. I put Emma in her crib and stood there for a moment watching her sleep. She looked so peaceful, so content. The tight knot of worry that had been living in my chest for the past week finally started to loosen. I was halfway down the hallway, already planning to take a hot shower and get some real sleep, when I heard the first sound that made my blood freeze in my veins. Not crying. Emma rarely cried when she was truly settled for the night. This was something else entirely. A strange gasping sound, like she was struggling to breathe. I ran back to her room and found her convulsing in her crib. Her small body was rigid and shaking, her eyes rolled back so only the whites were showing. Foam was coming from her mouth and her lips were starting to turn blue around the edges. Oh God, Emma! I scooped her up, her body burning hot and trembling against my chest. Her breathing was shallow and irregular, and when I called her name, she didn't respond, didn't even seem to hear me. I ran for my phone, dialing 911 with shaking fingers while trying to keep Emma upright and breathing. The dispatcher's voice was calm and professional, asking questions I could barely process through my panic. My baby is having a seizure. She's 8 months old. She was fine, and then... My voice broke as Emma's body went rigid again, another wave of convulsions racking her small frame. Ma'am, I need you to stay calm. An ambulance is on the way. Is the baby breathing? I checked, my nursing school training kicking in despite my terror. Yes, but it's shallow and there's foam coming from her mouth. Okay, I need you to make sure her airway is clear. Turn her on her side if you can, but don't put anything in her mouth. Don't try to restrain the seizure. Just keep her safe and keep talking to me. The next 15 minutes were the longest of my life. I followed the dispatcher's instructions, trying to keep Emma stable, while her little body fought against whatever was attacking her system. Outside, I could hear sirens wailing up the coastal road, getting closer with each passing second. The paramedics arrived like a small army, filling my quiet house with urgent voices and medical equipment. They worked on Emma right there on my living room floor, starting an IV that looked impossibly large on her tiny arm, checking her vital signs, asking rapid-fire questions about her medical history and what she had eaten or been exposed to. I answered as best I could, but my mind kept going blank with terror. The lead paramedic was a woman about my age with kind eyes and steady hands, and she kept talking to Emma in a soothing voice while she worked. Any new medications? She asked, checking her pupils with a small flashlight. Anything different in her routine today? Any new foods or supplements? That's when I remembered the formula. The container sitting on my kitchen counter. The supplement I'd mixed into Emma's bottle just 2 hours ago. There was something... I said, my voice barely a whisper. My sister brought some formula supplements. I gave Emma 1 dose in her evening bottle. The paramedic's expression sharpened immediately. Do you still have the containers? I nodded, running to the kitchen and grabbing all 3 containers plus the partially mixed bottle. When I handed them over, I saw something pass between the 2 paramedics, a look that made my blood run even colder than it already was. We need to get her to UCSF Children's Hospital immediately. This looks like acute chemical poisoning. Poisoning? The word hit me like a physical blow. I watched them load my unconscious daughter into the ambulance, her small body dwarfed by the adult-sized medical equipment, and felt my world tilt sideways. Charlotte had poisoned my baby. My own sister had looked me in the eye, handed me something she claimed would help, and watched me give it to my daughter. She had stood in my living room, touched Emma's face, called her fragile, and then given me the tools to hurt her. The ride to San Francisco felt like it lasted forever and no time at all. Emma remained unconscious, her breathing supported by a small oxygen mask that covered half her face. I held her tiny hand and whispered promises I wasn't sure I could keep, that she would be okay, that Mommy would fix this, that Daddy would come home soon. At the hospital, they rushed her into the pediatric intensive care unit while I stood in the hallway, still wearing the yoga pants and milk-stained shirt I'd put on that morning, watching through glass doors as a team of doctors worked to save my daughter's life. A nurse brought me paperwork to fill out, questions about insurance and emergency contacts and medical history. Under emergency contact, I wrote Jake's name and his satellite phone number, even though I knew it was probably useless. He was somewhere in the Pacific Northwest, probably in the middle of a classified search and rescue operation, unreachable by normal communication channels. But then I remembered something else. Something Jake had told me during our last secure video call when he seemed more serious than usual about family emergency protocols. If anything happens, Becca, anything at all, you call my father directly. Not through normal Coast Guard channels, not through the base operator. You call Admiral Harrison's private emergency line. He has protocols in place that can reach me anywhere in the world, no matter what operation I'm running. I'd asked what could possibly happen that would require emergency military intervention at the highest levels. Jake had just smiled and said, hopefully nothing. But if something does, you'll know what to do. Now I knew what he'd meant. I found Admiral Harrison's private number in my phone contacts. Jake had insisted I program it in as a backup emergency contact months ago and called from the hospital corridor. It rang once before a crisp, authoritative voice answered. Admiral Harrison? Admiral, this is Rebecca, Jake's wife. I need to reach him immediately. It's a family emergency involving Emma. There was a brief pause. Then his voice changed completely from the polite distance he usually maintained with me to something much more focused and dangerous. What's the nature of the emergency, Rebecca? Shh! Someone poisoned Emma. She's in intensive care at UCSF Children's Hospital. I need Jake to come home. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long I thought we'd lost connection. When Admiral Harrison finally spoke, his voice was different. Not the formal, somewhat distant father-in-law I'd known, but something else entirely. Something cold and absolutely lethal. Rebecca, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Are you somewhere private where you can talk freely? I looked around the hospital corridor. A few other families were scattered in chairs, dealing with their own crises, but no one was paying attention to me. Yes. First, I want you to know that Emma is going to be fine. We're going to make sure of that. Second, I need you to preserve those formula containers and any remaining powder. Don't let anyone else handle them except the medical team. They're evidence now. Evidence? The word sent a chill through me. Rebecca, someone attacked my granddaughter. They attacked my family. His voice got even colder. I'm not just Emma's grandfather. I'm not just Jake's father. I command the largest Coast Guard fleet in the Pacific, and I have resources that most people can't even imagine. Whoever did this to Emma just made the biggest mistake of their life. The line went quiet for a moment, then Admiral Harrison spoke again, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. I'm mobilizing everything, Rebecca. Coast Guard, federal law enforcement, private resources. By the time I'm done, we'll know exactly who did this and why. What should I do? Stay with Emma. Take care of her. Document everything, every conversation you remember, every detail about who had access to her formula. And Rebecca, yes, sir? This ends tonight. I promise you that. After we hung up, I sat in that hospital chair and stared at my phone. Emma was fighting for her life behind glass doors, hooked up to machines that beeped and hummed with mechanical precision. Charlotte was probably at home right now, maybe having dinner or watching television, completely unaware that her carefully planned cruelty had just triggered something much bigger than she could possibly imagine. She thought she was dealing with an isolated young mother whose husband was conveniently thousands of miles away. She had no idea that Emma's grandfather wasn't just any Coast Guard officer, but one of the most powerful men in maritime law enforcement. She didn't know about his security clearance, his connections to federal agencies, and the vast fortune that came from the Harrison family's shipping empire. But she was about to find out, because in 12 hours, when Admiral Harrison's private jet landed at San Francisco International Airport, my sister's world was going to change forever. And this time, I wouldn't be the one left defenseless and alone. The morning after Emma's poisoning, I woke up in a hospital recliner with a crick in my neck and the sound of medical monitors providing a steady electronic lullaby. For a moment, I forgot where I was. Then I saw my daughter's small form in the hospital bed, still connected to various machines but breathing steadily on her own. and everything came flooding back.
The nurses had been rotating through the night like guardian angels, checking Emma's vitals, adjusting her IV medications, speaking in hushed tones that medical professionals use when they're cautiously optimistic but not ready to celebrate. Dr. Sarah Chen, the pediatric toxicologist who'd taken over Emma's care, had explained that they'd identified the compound that caused the seizures, a synthetic neurotropic agent that had no legitimate medical use and could cause permanent brain damage in developing children. "We're going to keep monitoring her for the next 72 hours, Dr. Chen had said, her voice gentle but serious. "The good news is that you brought her in quickly, and we were able to counteract most of the toxin. Children her age have remarkable resilience, but we want to ensure there are no lasting neurological effects." Now, watching the steady rise and fall of Emma's chest in the early morning light filtering through the hospital blinds, I felt a rage so pure and crystalline it surprised me with its intensity. This wasn't the hot anger I'd felt during Charlotte's years of cutting remarks and psychological manipulation. This was something else entirely. A cold, focused hatred that felt like it could cut through steel. My sister had tried to kill my baby. Not accidentally, not through negligence, but deliberately. She'd researched whatever compound she'd given me, had probably planned this for weeks, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike when I was most isolated and vulnerable. I was checking my phone for messages when I heard familiar footsteps in the corridor outside. Heavy, measured, with the distinctive cadence of someone accustomed to command. My heart jumped as I looked up to see Admiral Harrison filling the doorway. He was still wearing his dress blue uniform from whatever urgent meeting he'd left to get here, his silver hair perfectly groomed despite having traveled through the night. At 62, William Harrison commanded respect through presence alone, 6 feet tall with steel gray eyes that missed nothing, and a bearing that suggested he was used to having his orders followed without question. But when he looked at Emma first, his expression softened completely. The powerful admiral disappeared, replaced by a grandfather seeing his granddaughter fighting for her life. Then he looked at me, and I saw my own fury reflected back in his eyes, multiplied by the protective instincts of a man who'd spent 40 years defending people who couldn't defend themselves. "How is she?" His voice was quiet, controlled, but I could hear the steel underneath. "Better. The doctors think she'll make a full recovery. They've identified the toxin and neutralized most of it." I stood up from the chair, my legs unsteady from sitting in one position too long. Admiral Harrison crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled me into an embrace that smelled like sea salt and expensive cologne. For the first time since finding Emma convulsing in the crib, I felt truly safe. This wasn't just Emma's grandfather. This was one of the most powerful men in federal law enforcement, and he was furious. "I know what she did, and I know exactly what I'm going to do about it," he said quietly against my hair. We stood there for a moment, watching Emma sleep peacefully while machines monitored every aspect of her recovery. Then Admiral Harrison pulled back and looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not angry exactly, but absolutely certain, like he'd already set forces in motion that couldn't be stopped. "Rebecca, I need you to tell me everything. Every detail you can remember about yesterday, about Charlotte's visit, about what she said and how she said it. Don't leave anything out, no matter how insignificant it might seem." I walked him through the entire encounter, from the moment Charlotte appeared at my door to finding Emma convulsing in her crib. Admiral Harrison listened without interrupting, his face growing more grim with every detail. When I got to the part about Charlotte touching Emma's face and commenting on how fragile babies were, something flickered across his expression that made me glad I wasn't on the receiving end of his anger. "She brought 3 containers, I said, pointing to the evidence bags the police had collected. "I only used 1, and only a small amount." "If you'd followed her recommended dosage?" he asked quietly. I couldn't finish the sentence. Admiral Harrison took my hand, his thumb tracing across my knuckles in a gesture that reminded me so much of Jake. "But you didn't. You followed your instincts and used less than she suggested. That probably saved Emma's life." He looked at our daughter again, then back at me. "Did she say anything specific about where she obtained these compounds? Any details about her pharmaceutical connections?" "She claimed her company was developing them for nationwide launch, that they were in clinical trials, but Admiral, I've never heard of any legitimate company developing unregulated supplements for infants." "Because they don't exist." His voice was flat, certain.
I've already had my people investigate. Charlotte works for Pacific Biosolutions, and they manufacture adult psychiatric medications. They don't have an infant nutrition division, and they're not conducting any clinical trials involving babies.
I could hear a woman's voice on the other end, speaking rapidly in what sounded like a briefing format. Admiral Harrison's responses were minimal: confirmed, understood, proceed with phase 2. But his face grew darker with each exchange. After hanging up, he sat down in the chair next to Emma's bed and stared at our sleeping daughter for a long moment. I could practically see him processing information, weighing options, making decisions that would have far-reaching consequences.
Rebecca, there's something you need to understand about my position and the resources it gives me access to. He turned to face me fully. I don't just command Coast Guard operations in the Pacific. I coordinate with multiple federal agencies on maritime security, drug interdiction, and domestic terrorism prevention. My security clearance gives me access to investigative capabilities that most people don't even know exist. He paused, choosing his words carefully. When you called me last night and told me someone had poisoned Emma, I didn't just arrange emergency leave for Jake. I initiated protocols we use when there are credible threats against high-ranking military personnel and their families. The weight of his words settled over me slowly. You mean this is being treated as a potential national security issue? Someone attempted to harm the child of a Coast Guard officer with access to classified operations. For all we know, your sister was working with hostile foreign agents trying to compromise Jake through his family. I stared at him. You don't really think Charlotte is some kind of spy? No, I think she's exactly what she appears to be. A jealous, vindictive woman who wanted to hurt you in the worst possible way. But the protocols don't care what I think. They care about eliminating threats to military families and sending a message that such attacks will be met with overwhelming federal response. His phone buzzed again with a text message. Admiral Harrison glanced at it, and that cold smile returned. Right on schedule. What's on schedule? Charlotte just attempted to access Emma's medical records through the hospital's patient portal. She used her pharmaceutical company credentials to try to gain unauthorized access to confidential medical information. He showed me the message on his phone, a notification from someone called Agent Rodriguez. She wanted to know Emma's condition, whether her experiment had worked as planned. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. She'd poisoned my baby and then tried to check up on her handiwork like she was monitoring a laboratory test subject. How do you know that? Because as of 6 hours ago, every electronic communication Charlotte makes is being monitored by a joint task force I assembled specifically to investigate threats against my family. Admiral Harrison stood and walked to the window, looking out at the San Francisco Bay where Coast Guard cutters moved like white specks against the morning fog. Her phone, her computer, her work systems, her bank accounts, her credit cards, all of it is being tracked in real time by some of the best cyber intelligence specialists in the federal government. I felt like I was hearing about a stranger, not the sister I had grown up with. What has she been doing? She sent 4 text messages to her friend Diana last night, asking if she'd heard anything about the baby situation. She Googled infant seizure symptoms and criminal penalties for child endangerment around midnight. This morning, she called in sick to work and spent an hour researching how to permanently delete browser histories and clear digital footprints. Admiral Harrison turned back to me, his expression almost gentle despite the steel in his voice. She also made one other call, to a criminal defense attorney who specializes in cases involving harm to children. She hasn't been arrested yet, hasn't even been questioned, but she's already preparing legal defense strategies. When will they arrest her? They won't. Not immediately. Admiral Harrison's smile was cold enough to freeze water. We're going to let her think she's succeeded.
let her believe she's gotten away with it. Maybe even let her get confident enough to try covering her tracks more extensively. And when she does, we'll have everything we need to destroy her completely. The word destroy hung in the air between us. Not arrest, not prosecute, destroy. What does that mean exactly? It means that Charlotte Hayes is about to discover what happens when you attack the family of someone with access to the full resources of the United States Coast Guard, federal law enforcement, and the Harrison family's considerable private assets. His voice carried the weight of absolute authority. It means that every crime she's ever committed, every law she's ever broken, every person she's ever harmed is going to be brought to light through the most thorough investigation money and federal power can buy. His phone buzzed again, and he glanced at it with satisfaction. Agent Rodriguez is downstairs with the preliminary findings. She's going to brief us on what the task force has discovered in the past 8 hours, and then we're going to discuss how to proceed. He looked at Emma, who was beginning to stir in her hospital bed. But first, I want to hold my granddaughter. Admiral Harrison lifted Emma carefully, mindful of the IV lines and monitoring leads, and settled into the chair with her against his chest. Emma opened her eyes and looked up at her grandfather with that serious expression that always made my heart melt. "Hello, little one. Grandpa's here, and Grandpa's going to make sure nothing like this ever happens to you again." Then Agent Rodriguez appeared in the doorway, and reality came flooding back. She was younger than I had expected, maybe mid-30s, with dark hair pulled back in a professional bun and the kind of alertness that suggested she'd been working through the night. She wore a crisp gray suit and carried a tablet and several thick file folders. "Admiral Harrison," she said, nodding respectfully. "Mrs. Harrison, I'm Special Agent Rodriguez with the Coast Guard Investigative Service. I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances, but I want you to know that threats against Coast Guard families receive our highest priority attention." She pulled up a chair and opened her tablet, revealing what looked like a comprehensive intelligence dossier on my sister. In the past 8 hours, we've assembled a complete profile on Charlotte Hayes, including her employment history, financial records, personal relationships, digital communications, and psychological evaluation. What we found is deeply disturbing. The screen filled with documents, bank statements, employment records, email threads, phone logs, psychological assessment charts. It was like seeing Charlotte's entire life laid out in clinical detail. First, the compound she used to poison your daughter. We've identified it as a synthetic neurotoxin called compound NX7, which is not approved for any medical use anywhere in the world. It's currently being researched as a potential chemical weapon by hostile foreign governments. She swiped to the next screen, showing a series of financial transactions. 4 months ago, Charlotte made contact with someone using the alias Dr. Kellerman through an encrypted dark web marketplace. She paid him $12,000 in cryptocurrency for what she described as research materials for advanced pediatric nutrition studies. $12,000. 4 months of planning. My sister had spent more money trying to kill my baby than most people spent on a car. Dr. Kellerman doesn't exist, of course. The cryptocurrency payments were traced to a network that specializes in selling illegal chemical compounds to people who want to harm others without detection. Mostly domestic terrorists, unfortunately, but also individuals involved in organized criminal activities. Agent Rodriguez swiped again, and the screen filled with text messages that made my blood run cold. These are communications between Charlotte and her friend Diana Morrison over the past 6 months. The content becomes increasingly disturbing as we move through the timeline. I read the messages with growing horror. They started normally enough: workplace complaints, social gossip, the usual digital chatter. But gradually they took a darker tone. Charlotte complained about my perfect little life, my hero husband who thinks he's saving the world, my spoiled princess baby who gets everything handed to her.
The messages became progressively more vicious. She called me weak, pathetic, undeserving of happiness. She said Jake was probably having affairs during his deployments, that I was too naive to realize it. She said Emma would probably grow up to be a disappointment, just like her mother. But it was the messages from the past 2 months that made my hands shake as I read them. "I'm so tired of watching her play happy family while the rest of us struggle," one read. "She needs to learn what real loss feels like," read another. "Maybe something will happen to bring her back down to reality. Maybe that perfect little princess baby isn't as healthy as she thinks." And finally, from just 10 days ago, "I have a plan, something that will teach her a lesson she'll never forget." Agent Rodriguez closed the tablet and looked at me with professional sympathy mixed with genuine anger. "Mrs. Harrison, this wasn't a crime of passion or a moment of poor judgment. This was a carefully orchestrated attempt to murder your child, motivated by jealousy and resentment that had been building for months." Admiral Harrison shifted Emma in his arms, his jaw tight with controlled fury. "What kind of timeline are we looking at for additional evidence?" The digital forensics team is still working, but based on these preliminary findings, we believe Charlotte may have been planning this attack since shortly after Emma was born. She's been researching infant vulnerability, studying your routines, and gradually acquiring the materials she needed to carry out her plan. The room went very quiet, except for the steady beep of Emma's heart monitor. Even that sound seemed muted against the weight of what Agent Rodriguez was telling us. "So what happens now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Agent Rodriguez smiled, and it wasn't entirely pleasant. "Now, we begin the systematic investigation and prosecution of Charlotte Hayes under federal statutes covering terrorism, attempted murder of a federal officer's family member, and conspiracy to commit crimes against the United States." She opened one of her file folders and pulled out several documents. But that's just the beginning. You see, when we started investigating Charlotte's background, we uncovered something much deeper than a single attempted murder. Agent Rodriguez pulled out a thick file folder marked classified in red letters. "Mrs. Harrison, what I'm about to show you requires the highest level of confidentiality. Your father-in-law has granted you temporary security clearance due to the circumstances, but this information cannot leave this room." She opened the folder to reveal photographs, financial documents, and what looked like organizational charts connecting various criminal networks. When we started investigating Charlotte's cryptocurrency transactions, we uncovered something much larger than a single attempted murder. Your sister was involved with an international network that supplies untraceable chemical weapons to domestic terrorists, contract killers, and what they call revenge clients. Admiral Harrison leaned forward, still holding Emma. "How large are we talking?" "Global, operating in 17 countries with estimated annual revenue of over $50 million. They specialize in compounds designed to mimic natural deaths, accidental poisonings, and sudden illnesses that won't raise suspicion during routine autopsies."
Agent Rodriguez spread out several photographs showing laboratory facilities hidden in warehouses, shipping containers filled with chemical equipment, and arrest photos of people I didn't recognize. Charlotte wasn't just a customer, she was what they call a field researcher, someone who tested new compounds on real targets and provided feedback about effectiveness, detection rates, and victim selection strategies. The words hit me like physical blows. "You're saying she's done this before?" "We believe so. The network she was involved with keeps detailed records of all field tests, and we've found references to at least 4 previous cases involving Charlotte over the past 3 years. All of them involved children. All of them appeared to be natural deaths or accidents, and all of them occurred in locations where Charlotte was traveling for her pharmaceutical job." Agent Rodriguez pulled out a map showing dots across the western United States. Portland, Oregon, 18 months ago, a 6-month-old boy named Tyler Chen died of what appeared to be sudden infant death syndrome. His mother, Sarah Chen, was a single Navy wife whose husband was deployed overseas. Charlotte was in Portland for a pharmaceutical conference that week. She pointed to another location, Phoenix, Arizona, 14 months ago. Twin girls, Madison and Mia Torres, died within hours of each other from what appeared to be severe food poisoning. Their mother, Lieutenant Rosa Torres, was a Marine stationed at the nearby airbase. Charlotte attended a medical symposium in Phoenix during that exact time frame. The pattern was becoming sickeningly clear. Charlotte hadn't just been targeting random children, she'd been hunting military families, using her pharmaceutical credentials to gain access to isolated mothers whose husbands were deployed or stationed far from family support systems. Seattle, Washington, 8 months ago. 3-year-old Joshua Walsh died of what appeared to be an allergic reaction to new medication. His mother, Commander Lisa Walsh, was a Coast Guard officer who'd recently been promoted to a demanding position that required extensive travel. Charlotte was documented attending a conference in Seattle the week before Joshua's death. Admiral Harrison's face had gone absolutely white. Lisa Walsh reports to me. I was at Joshua's funeral. I held Lisa while she sobbed and blamed herself for not recognizing the signs of an allergic reaction. According to the network's records, Charlotte received bonuses for each successful field test. She was paid extra for targeting military families because the psychological impact on the mothers was considered especially valuable data for future operations. I felt like I was going to be sick. She was being paid to destroy families, to make mothers blame themselves for their children's deaths? Exactly. The network analyzed grief patterns, suicide rates among bereaved parents, and long-term psychological damage to help them refine their targeting strategies. Charlotte's detailed reports about victim selection and aftermath documentation were being used to train other operatives. Agent Rodriguez pulled out another document, this one showing Charlotte's communications with her handlers. She wrote about you specifically, Mrs. Harrison, about your isolation, your husband's deployment schedule, your lack of family support in the area. You weren't just your sister, you were her ideal test subject. The clinical language made my stomach turn. Charlotte had written about Emma like she was a laboratory rat, analyzing the best methods to cause maximum psychological damage to me while ensuring the death would appear accidental. How many other families? Admiral Harrison asked, his voice deadly quiet. We're still investigating, but conservatively, this network has been responsible for over 300 deaths in the past 5 years. Children, elderly people, political dissidents, business rivals, anyone whose death could be made to look natural while serving their clients' purposes. Agent Rodriguez showed us surveillance photos of people being arrested around the world. The intelligence Charlotte provided about American military families, their vulnerabilities and psychological profiles, was being sold to foreign intelligence services interested in destabilizing U.S. military readiness through personal tragedy. The scoop of it was staggering. Charlotte hadn't just been a serial killer, she'd been a traitor selling information about American military families to hostile foreign governments. What's being done to shut this down? I asked. Everything. Admiral Harrison's voice carried the weight of absolute authority. I've authorized joint operations with the FBI, CIA, DEA, and international law enforcement. We're not just going after Charlotte. We're dismantling the entire network. Agent Rodriguez nodded. In the past 12 hours, we've conducted coordinated raids in 7 countries. We've arrested 43 individuals, seized enough chemical weapons to poison a small city, and recovered financial records that implicate hundreds of additional conspirators. She showed us photos of the arrests, men and women in handcuffs being led away from what looked like sophisticated laboratory facilities. The intelligence we gathered from Charlotte's communications has given us access to their entire operational structure. Client lists, supplier networks, safe houses, financial accounts, everything. But Charlotte doesn't know this yet? Charlotte thinks she's successfully covered her tracks. She believes Emma's poisoning will be attributed to contaminated formula or manufacturing defects. She has no idea that her attempt on your daughter's life triggered the largest coordinated investigation into chemical terrorism in U.S. history. Admiral Harrison's phone buzzed with another message. He glanced at it, and his expression became even grimmer. She's on the move. Where? According to GPS tracking, she just left her apartment with 2 large suitcases and is heading towards San Francisco International Airport, booked on a flight to Mexico City, departing in 4 hours. Agent Rodriguez immediately opened her tablet and began typing rapidly. She's running. Something spooked her. What could have spooked her? I asked. You said she thinks she got away with it. Unless... Agent Rodriguez paused in her typing, a look of realization crossing her face. She may have detected our surveillance. Charlotte isn't just a killer. She's a pharmaceutical professional with access to sophisticated technology. If she ran counter-surveillance protocols on her own devices...
Admiral Harrison stood up carefully, still holding Emma. How much of a head start does she have? 3 hours to departure, but she'll never make it onto that plane. I'm coordinating with TSA and airport security now. Agent Rodriguez was speaking rapidly into her phone, issuing orders in the kind of professional shorthand that meant serious resources were being mobilized. What if she doesn't go to the airport? I asked. What if this is a diversion? Agent Rodriguez paused in her conversation. Explain. Charlotte's always been smart about misdirection. Even as kids, she'd create elaborate fake-outs to avoid getting in trouble. What if she knows you're watching her electronics and she's using the airport booking to draw attention away from her real escape plan? Admiral Harrison looked at me with new respect. What would you do if you were trying to disappear and you suspected federal surveillance? I thought about it, trying to channel the strategic thinking Charlotte had always been so good at. I'd create multiple false trails, book the obvious escape flight to make you think I was panicking and running. But I'd also have backup plans, maybe a car rented under a different name or a boat or even just a safe house where I could lay low until the heat died down. She grew up here, Admiral Harrison said slowly. She knows the area, knows the terrain. If she wanted to disappear locally rather than flee the country... Agent Rodriguez was already pulling up maps on her tablet. The Harrison family has extensive property holdings throughout Northern California. If Charlotte researched your family as thoroughly as we think she did, she might know about locations that aren't widely publicized. Admiral Harrison's expression became very serious. There's a private airstrip on my ranch in Napa Valley. It's not listed in any public records, and Charlotte could have learned about it through Jake's social media or family conversations. How would she access it? She wouldn't need to access it. She'd just need to know that private planes use it regularly, which means there's probably a way to arrange transport without going through commercial airports or federal screening. Agent Rodriguez was speaking rapidly into her phone again, coordinating what sounded like a massive, multi-agency response. We're repositioning surveillance teams throughout the Bay Area. Air support is being scrambled to monitor all private airstrips within a 200-mile radius. But I was thinking about something else Charlotte had said during her visit. She mentioned having friends in high places, people who could help with difficult situations. What if she's not trying to escape the country? What if she's planning to disappear locally and wait for this to blow over? Disappear how? Admiral Harrison asked. She has pharmaceutical connections, access to chemicals that could alter her appearance or even fake her own death. What if instead of running, she's planning to eliminate the only witness who can directly connect her to Emma's poisoning? The realization hit all 3 of us at the same time. Charlotte wasn't running away. She was coming for me. Agent Rodriguez immediately began issuing new orders. I need a full security detail at UCSF Children's Hospital immediately. All entrances monitored, all staff credentials verified, all visitors screened. Treat this as a direct threat against a federal witness. How quickly can she get here? I asked, suddenly feeling very exposed in the hospital room with its large windows and multiple access points. If she left her apartment 90 minutes ago and is driving directly here, she could arrive within the hour, Admiral Harrison said, his voice tight with concern. But Rebecca, I need you to understand something. Charlotte isn't just desperate anymore. She's cornered, and cornered predators are the most dangerous. Agent Rodriguez closed her tablet and stood up.
Mrs. Harrison, we're going to move you and Emma to a secure floor of the hospital immediately. Full federal protection until we have Charlotte in custody. What about Jake? Does he know what's happening? Admiral Harrison looked at his watch. Jake's helicopter landed at Travis Air Force Base 20 minutes ago. He'll be here within the hour, along with a full Coast Guard security team. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text message. My heart jumped when I saw it was from Charlotte. Rebecca, I heard about Emma's emergency. I'm so worried about her. I'm coming to the hospital right now to help. Everything's going to be okay. I showed the message to Agent Rodriguez, who immediately began speaking into her radio. Suspect is actively approaching target location. All units condition red. This is not a drill. Admiral Harrison took Emma from my arms and handed her to a nurse who had appeared in the doorway. We need to move, now. But as we prepared to leave the room, my phone buzzed again with another message from Charlotte. This one made my blood freeze. Rebecca, I know you showed them our text messages. I know what you think I did, but you have no idea what's really coming. Some mistakes can't be undone, and some families can't be protected. See you soon. Agent Rodriguez read the message over my shoulder and her face went pale. She's not just coming to eliminate a witness, she's coming to finish what she started. Outside the hospital windows, I could see Coast Guard helicopters circling like mechanical birds of prey, and in the distance, the sound of sirens approaching from multiple directions. Charlotte had triggered something much bigger than she'd ever imagined, but she was still out there, still dangerous, and still determined to hurt my family. The question was, would federal law enforcement and Admiral Harrison's resources be enough to stop someone who'd already proven she was willing to murder children to satisfy her own twisted psychological needs? In less than an hour, we were about to find out.
The secure wing of UCSF Children's Hospital felt like a fortress under siege. Federal agents had transformed the 7th floor into what Agent Rodriguez called a hardened perimeter, with metal detectors at every elevator bank, armed guards stationed at each stairwell, and surveillance equipment that turned the hallways into an electronic maze of protection. Emma had been moved to a corner room with only one entrance, surrounded by pediatric intensive care equipment that beeped and hummed with reassuring electronic precision. Despite everything happening around us, she seemed to be improving by the hour. Her color was better, her responses more alert, and the doctors were cautiously optimistic about her neurological recovery. But I couldn't shake the feeling that we were trapped rather than protected. The hospital has been in lockdown for 45 minutes, Agent Rodriguez reported, checking her tablet for the latest updates. All visitors are being screened through federal databases, all staff credentials verified in real time, and we have aerial surveillance covering a 3-mile radius around the building. Admiral Harrison stood by the window, watching Coast Guard helicopters patrol the airspace above San Francisco Bay. Any sign of Charlotte? Her cell phone went dark 30 minutes ago. GPS tracking shows her last known location as the Marina District, about 2 miles from here. She abandoned her car in a public parking garage and disappeared into foot traffic. I held Emma closer, trying to draw comfort from her steady breathing and the warm weight of her small body against my chest. She knows the city well. She lived here during college, and she's always been good at blending in when she doesn't want to be found. We have her photograph distributed to every security checkpoint in the Bay Area. Facial recognition software is running at all major transit hubs, and we've coordinated with local law enforcement to establish checkpoints on all major roads leading out of the city. But even as she spoke, I could see the concern in her expression. Charlotte wasn't just any criminal trying to evade capture. She was someone with pharmaceutical expertise, professional connections, and 4 years of experience working with international chemical weapons networks. She had resources and knowledge that could make her nearly impossible to track using conventional methods. My phone buzzed with an incoming call from an unknown number. Agent Rodriguez immediately signaled for me to answer while she activated recording equipment. Hello? Rebecca. Charlotte's voice was calm, almost cheerful, like she was calling to chat about weekend plans. I heard she had quite a scare yesterday. Agent Rodriguez was frantically typing on her tablet, trying to trace the call. She held up a sign indicating that she'd keep Charlotte talking. She's fine, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. No thanks to you. Charlotte laughed, and the sound made my skin crawl. Oh, Rebecca, always so dramatic.
I brought you supplements to help with Emma's digestive issues, and somehow you've convinced yourself I was trying to hurt her? It's almost pathetic how paranoid new mothers can become. The doctors identified the compound, Charlotte. They know what you gave her wasn't a supplement. Doctors make mistakes all the time. Laboratory tests can be contaminated, results can be misinterpreted. By the time this all gets sorted out, I'm sure they'll realize it was just an unfortunate reaction to a perfectly safe nutritional product. Agent Rodriguez was shaking her head. The trace wasn't working. Charlotte was using some kind of technology that prevented location tracking. Where are you? Close enough to help when you need me, far enough away to stay safe from all those scary federal agents who seem to think I'm some kind of criminal mastermind. Her voice carried a note of amusement that made me realize she was treating this entire situation like a game. Did you know they've frozen my bank accounts? Apparently they think I'm involved in some kind of international conspiracy. It's quite flattering, really. Admiral Harrison moved closer to the phone, his expression intense. He motioned for me to ask about her plans. What do you want, Charlotte? I want my sister back, the Rebecca who used to trust me, who used to come to me for advice when she was scared or overwhelmed. Not this paranoid stranger who sees threats everywhere and hides behind federal agents instead of talking to her own family. The manipulation was breathtaking in its audacity. Even now, with overwhelming evidence of her crimes, Charlotte was trying to make me doubt my own perceptions and blame myself for the situation. You tried to kill my daughter. I tried to help Emma with her digestive problems. If the supplement I brought caused an unexpected reaction, I'm as horrified as you are. But Rebecca, I'm your sister. I love you and Emma more than anyone else in the world. Why would I ever want to hurt either of you? Agent Rodriguez was holding up signs indicating that Charlotte was using a voice-over IP service that bounced the call through multiple international servers. She could be anywhere in the world, or she could be in the hospital parking garage. The FBI found your communications with the Chemical Weapons Network, I said, deciding to test how much she really knew about the investigation. There was a long pause before Charlotte responded, and when she did, her voice had lost its cheerful tone. I don't know what you're talking about, Rebecca, but I do know that federal agencies sometimes manufacture evidence to justify their investigations. They probably told you all kinds of terrible things about me to turn you against your own family. They showed me your text messages about planning something to teach me a lesson. They found your cryptocurrency payments for illegal compounds. Another pause, longer this time, and when Charlotte spoke again, her voice was completely different, cold, calculating, stripped of all pretense.
You really have no idea what you've gotten yourself into, do you? You think hiding in that hospital with your federal babysitters makes you safe? You think Admiral Harrison's money and influence can protect you from people who've been killing for longer than you've been alive? Agent Rodriguez was frantically signaling other agents in the hallway. Something in Charlotte's tone had triggered alarms throughout the security team. What are you saying? I'm saying that Emma's poisoning was just the beginning. The network I work with doesn't tolerate witnesses, Rebecca. They don't leave loose ends. And unfortunately for you, Admiral Harrison's investigation has made your entire family into very dangerous loose ends. The line went dead. Agent Rodriguez immediately began speaking into her radio in rapid bursts of tactical language. Suspect has made direct threats against protected persons. Escalate to Condition Alpha. I repeat, Condition Alpha. What does that mean? I asked, though I was afraid I already knew. It means Charlotte just confirmed she's working with people who will kill to protect their operations. And it means this hospital is no longer safe for you and Emma. Admiral Harrison turned from the window, his face grim. How quickly can we move them? Coast Guard Air Transport is standing by on the hospital roof. We can have them at a secure federal facility within 30 minutes. But before anyone could move, the lights in Emma's room flickered and went out. Emergency lighting kicked in immediately, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. Through the window, I could see that the power outage extended throughout the surrounding city blocks. This wasn't a hospital malfunction. It was a coordinated attack on the electrical grid. Backup generator should activate in 60 seconds, Agent Rodriguez said, but I could hear her concern in her voice. This wasn't part of any scheduled maintenance.
The hospital's PA system crackled to life with an announcement that made my blood freeze. Code Silver. Code Silver. Security alert on all floors. This is not a drill. Agent Rodriguez was speaking rapidly into her radio, but all she was getting back was static. Communications are down. Whatever they did to the power grid, it's also interfering with our radio frequencies. Through the window, I could see Coast Guard helicopters circling lower, their searchlights sweeping across the hospital's exterior. But even they looked different now, more like predators hunting prey than protective guardians. Admiral Harrison moved to the door and tested the electronic lock. Manual override is still functioning. We're not trapped yet. Yet, Agent Rodriguez repeated grimly. But whoever planned this knows exactly how federal protection protocols work. They're systematically eliminating our advantages. Emma stirred in my arms, making soft baby sounds that reminded me what was really at stake here. This wasn't about Charlotte's jealousy anymore, or even about the criminal network she'd been working with. This was about survival, and about protecting an innocent child who'd already been through more trauma than any baby should ever experience. How many agents do we have in the hospital? 12 on this floor, another 8 in the lobby and parking areas. But without communications, we can't coordinate effectively. The backup generators hummed to life, restoring normal lighting and medical equipment function. But something felt wrong about the way the power had been restored. Too quick, too smooth, like it had been planned to fail and recover on a specific timeline. They're not trying to trap us in the dark, I realized suddenly. They're testing our response protocols, seeing how we react to infrastructure attacks, how quickly we adapt, what our backup systems look like. Agent Rodriguez stared at me. Why would they need that information? Because Charlotte's network doesn't just kill people, they study them. They research their targets, learn their security systems, identify their vulnerabilities. And right now, we're giving them a complete demonstration of how federal protection works. Admiral Harrison's expression became very serious. Rebecca's right. We're not just being hunted, we're being analyzed. Every move we make is providing intelligence about Coast Guard and federal security protocols. So what do we do? Before anyone could answer, there was a soft knock on Emma's door. 3 gentle taps, pause. 2 more taps, pause. 1 final tap. Agent Rodriguez drew her weapon and motioned for us to move away from the door. That's not one of our communication protocols. The knocking repeated, same pattern. Then a familiar voice called out softly, "Rebecca, it's Dr. Chen. I need to check on Emma's latest test results." But Dr. Chen had left for the day hours ago, and her voice sounded wrong, slightly higher pitched, with an accent that hadn't been there during our previous conversations. Agent Rodriguez positioned herself beside the door, weapon ready. "Dr. Chen is not currently on duty. Please identify yourself and state your credentials." I was called in for emergency consultation regarding Emma's neurological responses. The power fluctuation may have affected some of our monitoring equipment. Admiral Harrison moved to the window and looked down at the street below. What he saw made his face pale. "Rebecca, we need to leave. Now." "What is it?" "The Coast Guard helicopters are gone. Whatever's in the airspace above us now, it's not ours." The knocking on the door stopped. In the sudden silence, we could hear footsteps moving away down the hallway, but they didn't sound like someone leaving. They sounded like someone taking up a position to wait. Agent Rodriguez spoke into her radio one more time, but got only static in response. "Communications are down. Whatever they did to the power grid, it's also interfering with our radio frequencies." That's when I heard it, a sound that made every maternal instinct I had scream with terror. Somewhere in the building, a baby was crying. Not just any baby, but the specific pitch and rhythm that Emma made when she was frightened or in pain.
Except Emma was safe in my arms, sleeping peacefully despite all the chaos around us. "They have a recording of her," I whispered, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. "They've been watching us, listening to us, recording Emma's voice, and now they're using it to lure us out." The crying got louder, more desperate, coming from somewhere down the hallway.
Even knowing it was fake, every fiber of my being wanted to respond to that sound, to run toward a child who seemed to be in distress. Admiral Harrison checked his watch. Jake's helicopter should have landed 20 minutes ago. If he's not here yet, something's gone wrong. Agent Rodriguez was checking the ammunition in her weapon. We can't stay here. The longer we remain in one location, the more time they have to set up whatever they're planning. Where can we go? They've cut communications, eliminated our air support, and they obviously have people inside the hospital. There's one place they won't expect us to go, Admiral Harrison said grimly, directly toward them. The baby's crying stopped suddenly, replaced by an announcement over the hospital PA system. Rebecca Harrison, please report to the main lobby. Your sister Charlotte is here to help you and Emma get home safely. Agent Rodriguez shook her head. It's a trap, obviously. But as we stood there debating our options, I heard something that changed everything. Through the static and electronic interference, a voice came through on Agent Rodriguez's radio. Faint, distorted, but unmistakably familiar. Rebecca, if you can hear this, it's Jake. We're in the building, but they've set up some kind of jamming field that's blocking most communications. Whatever you do, don't trust anyone claiming to be hospital staff. Charlotte brought help, and they're not just here to eliminate witnesses, they're here to take Emma. The transmission cut off in a burst of static, but the message was clear. My husband was somewhere in the building fighting to reach us. Charlotte had brought reinforcements from her chemical weapons network, and their goal wasn't just to kill us, they wanted to kidnap my daughter. The question was, in a hospital full of enemies, with communications down and escape routes compromised, how do you protect a baby when you don't know who to trust and every decision could be your last? Admiral Harrison moved to Emma's medical equipment and began disconnecting the non-essential monitors. We're leaving, now. Agent Rodriguez, what's the fastest route to the roof? Emergency stairwell at the east end of the building, but it requires keycard access above the 5th floor. She was already gathering portable medical supplies for Emma. Problem is, we don't know if the elevator banks are compromised or if they have people positioned in the stairwells. I held Emma tighter as she stirred from all the activity around her. Even in sleep, she seemed to sense the tension, her tiny hands gripping my shirt with unconscious determination. What about the service corridors? Hospitals always have maintenance passages for equipment and supplies. Agent Rodriguez paused in her preparations. That's actually brilliant. Charlotte's people would be watching the obvious escape routes, but they might not know the building's infrastructure well enough to cover maintenance areas. Admiral Harrison was studying a hospital floor plan on his phone. There should be a service elevator that runs from the basement to the roof for large equipment. If we can reach it. A loud crash echoed from somewhere down the hallway, followed by shouting voices that definitely didn't sound like hospital staff. Agent Rodriguez immediately moved to the door, weapon drawn, listening intently. Multiple footsteps, organized movement, tactical communications. They're conducting a floor-by-floor search. How long before they reach us? Maybe 10 minutes if they're being thorough, less if they know exactly where we are. Admiral Harrison shouldered Emma's diaper bag and picked up the portable oxygen monitor. Rebecca, I need you to follow Agent Rodriguez exactly. No matter what happens, don't stop moving and don't look back. But as we prepared to leave, my phone buzzed with a text message from Jake. Dad, Rebecca, trapped on 3rd floor, they have snipers on surrounding buildings. Don't go to the roof. Service tunnel B7 leads to underground parking. Meet me there in 15 minutes. Agent Rodriguez read the message over my shoulder and immediately began typing a response. How do we know this is really Jake? The reply came instantly. Rebecca knows the password from our first date. Monterey Bay Aquarium, jellyfish exhibit, what I whispered when you touched the glass. I felt tears spring to my eyes as I remembered that moment. Jake had whispered, "You're more graceful than they are." It was such a specific, private memory that no one else could possibly know it. It's him, I said. That's definitely Jake. Agent Rodriguez was already pulling up building schematics on her tablet. Service Tunnel B7 connects to the hospital's main mechanical systems. If we can reach it, we can move through the building without being detected. What about the other federal agents? Can we warn them? Radio communications are still jammed, but I can try to leave coded messages at key checkpoints. The problem is, if Charlotte's people are monitoring our frequencies, they'll know we're moving. Admiral Harrison made the decision for us all.
We can't stay here waiting for them to find us. Move now, communicate later. Agent Rodriguez cracked the door open and listened carefully. The shouting voices had moved further away, but we could still hear organized movement throughout the building. She motioned for us to follow as she slipped into the hallway. The corridor looked like a movie set depicting some kind of medical thriller. Emergency lighting cast everything in harsh shadows, and the normal bustle of hospital activity had been replaced by an eerie silence, broken only by the distant sound of mechanical equipment and our own careful footsteps.
We moved single file along the wall, Agent Rodriguez leading with her weapon ready, me in the middle carrying Emma, and Admiral Harrison bringing up the rear while monitoring our 6 o'clock for any signs of pursuit. Every few steps, we paused to listen for movement or voices that might indicate hostile presence. The service corridor entrance was hidden behind what looked like a utility closet door. Agent Rodriguez produced a universal key card from her equipment kit and swiped it through the electronic reader. The lock disengaged with a soft click that sounded deafeningly loud in the quiet hallway. "Maintenance access requires biometric scanning during emergency protocols," she whispered, pointing to a fingerprint reader next to the door. "I'll have to override it manually." She pulled out what looked like a small electronic device and attached it to the biometric scanner. Within seconds, the device beeped softly and the door unlocked. The service corridor beyond was a different world entirely. Industrial lighting, exposed pipes and electrical conduits, and a narrow walkway that seemed to stretch endlessly into the building's mechanical heart. The air smelt like disinfectant and machinery, and our footsteps echoed despite our efforts to move quietly. "This connects to the main infrastructure tunnel," Agent Rodriguez explained, consulting her tablet as we walked. "From there, we can access service elevator B7 and reach the underground parking level." But as we moved deeper into the corridor, I began to notice things that made me increasingly uneasy. Fresh footprints in the dust on the floor, scuff marks on the walls that suggested recent traffic, and most disturbing of all, the faint scent of Charlotte's expensive perfume lingering in the recycled air. "Someone's been here recently," I whispered to Agent Rodriguez. She immediately raised her weapon and motioned for us to stop. "How recently?" "Minutes, maybe. I can smell my sister's perfume." Admiral Harrison moved up beside us, his expression grim. They knew about the service corridors. This wasn't random. They specifically prepared for us to use this escape route. Agent Rodriguez was studying her tablet, comparing our current location with the building's emergency protocols. If they know about the maintenance passages, they probably know about the service elevator too. We're walking into a trap. Then what do we do? We can't go back. They're searching the floors above us. We can't stay here. It's only a matter of time before they check the service areas. That's when we heard it. The sound of an elevator moving through the shaft somewhere ahead of us. Not the smooth, quiet operation of a modern passenger elevator, but the mechanical grinding of heavy equipment being moved between floors. Agent Rodriguez held up her hand for complete silence and activated what looked like a sophisticated listening device. Through it, we could hear voices echoing from the elevator shaft. "Confirmed visual on the targets entering service corridor D9 approximately 8 minutes ago." The voice was male, professional, with the kind of tactical communication style that suggested military or law enforcement background. Another voice responded, "Roger that. Teams Alpha and Bravo are in position at Tunnel Junction B7. Team Charlie is securing the underground parking level. No witnesses, no evidence." Agent Rodriguez's face went pale as she realized what we were hearing. They're not just trying to capture us. They're planning to eliminate everyone involved in the investigation. "Including Jake?" "Including everyone. Your husband, the other federal agents, probably the hospital staff who've seen too much." Admiral Harrison's expression became absolutely deadly. "How many people are we talking about?" "Based on the tactical communications, at least 12 hostiles, possibly more. They're coordinated, well-equipped, and they have detailed knowledge of this building's layout." Emma chose that moment to wake up and make a soft baby sound that seemed to echo through the service corridor like a gunshot. All three of us froze, listening for any indication that we'd been heard. What we heard instead was Charlotte's voice, coming from somewhere very close by. "Rebecca, I know you're in there. I can hear Emma fussing, and I know you're scared." Her voice was coming through what sounded like the building's ventilation system, amplified and distorted, but unmistakably hers. "I want you to know that none of this was supposed to happen. The plan was simple. Emma would have a peaceful sleep, you would grieve appropriately, and life would move on. But you had to involve federal agents, didn't you? You had to turn a family matter into an international incident. Now there are foreign intelligence operatives in this building, Rebecca. People who don't care about family bonds or sisterly love. People who see you and Emma as threats to a multi-million-dollar operation. And unfortunately, those people have convinced me that loose ends need to be tied up permanently." The ventilation system carried her voice through the entire corridor, making it impossible to determine her actual location. She could be anywhere in the building, or she could be speaking through remote communication equipment from miles away. "But I'm still your sister, Rebecca. I still want to protect you, even though you've made some very poor choices. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to come to the main lobby with Emma, you're going to dismiss your federal babysitters, and you're going to trust me to handle the situation before it gets any worse." Admiral Harrison was typing rapidly on his phone, apparently trying to communicate with someone outside the building. The Coast Guard has the entire hospital surrounded, but they can't move until they know where the hostiles are positioned. Charlotte's people are using civilians as human shields. What civilians? Hospital staff, patients who couldn't be evacuated, families of other children in the ICU. If we call in tactical teams, innocent people will be caught in the crossfire.
Agent Rodriguez checked her weapon and spare ammunition. "We need to reach Jake and coordinate with him before making any moves. 2 small teams have a better chance than 1 larger group." But as we prepared to continue through the service corridor, the lights went out again. This time, they stayed out, and the emergency lighting didn't activate. We were plunged into complete darkness, with only the faint glow from Agent Rodriguez's tactical flashlight to guide us. In the darkness, Charlotte's voice came through the ventilation system one more time. "You have 5 minutes to reach the lobby, Rebecca. After that, my new friends are going to start eliminating federal agents one by one until you comply. And trust me, they're very good at making people disappear." The sound of gunfire echoed from somewhere above us, rapid, professional bursts that suggested tactical weapons rather than civilian firearms. Agent Rodriguez grabbed my arm and pulled me forward through the darkness. "Jake's in trouble. We need to move now." But as we stumbled through the pitch-black service corridor, guided only by touch and the faint beam of Agent Rodriguez's flashlight, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being herded rather than escaping. Every choice we made, every route we took, seemed to be exactly what Charlotte and her people wanted us to do. The question was, were we walking toward a rescue or directly into the trap they'd been preparing since the moment Emma first convulsed in her crib? Behind us, the gunfire intensified, and ahead of us, the service elevator waited in the darkness like a mechanical mouth ready to swallow us whole. The service elevator shaft was a vertical tunnel of absolute darkness when we reached it. Agent Rodriguez's tactical flashlight revealed steel cables, exposed machinery, and a maintenance platform that hadn't been used in years. But more importantly, it revealed Jake. He was crouched behind the elevator equipment, dressed in full Coast Guard tactical gear, his face streaked with dust and what looked like dried blood. When he saw us emerge from the service corridor, relief flooded his features before quickly being replaced by urgent concern. "Rebecca, thank God." He moved toward us in a low crouch, staying below the level of the elevator doors. "Dad, Agent Rodriguez, situation report. 12 to 15 hostiles, coordinated operation, foreign intelligence involvement. They're using civilian shields and they want Emma alive." Jake's expression darkened. I've eliminated 3 hostiles on the upper floors, but there are more coming. They've got this building locked down tight. Snipers on surrounding rooftops, electronic jamming that's blocking most communications, and what looks like military-grade equipment. Agent Rodriguez was monitoring multiple communication channels on her equipment. What about extraction? Can we get out through the parking garage? Negative. They've got teams positioned at every exit. But, Dad, tell me you brought the Harrison Industries resources into this. Admiral Harrison smiled grimly. Son, I didn't just bring resources, I brought everything. He pulled out what looked like a military satellite phone and pressed a single button. Immediately, we could hear the sound of helicopters approaching from multiple directions. Not just 1 or 2, but what sounded like an entire squadron. Phoenix Squadron, this is Admiral Harrison. Execute Operation Family Shield. Authorization Tango 77 Alpha. The response came through crystal clear despite all the electronic jamming. Roger, Admiral. Phoenix Squadron executing. All civilian areas secured, hostile positions identified, green light for tactical intervention. Through the elevator shaft, we could suddenly hear explosions from the upper floors of the hospital. Not destructive blasts, but what sounded like flashbang grenades and tactical breaching charges. What's Phoenix Squadron? I asked, still holding Emma tightly as the sounds of combat intensified above us. Private military contractors, Admiral Harrison said. The Harrison family has maintained security contracts with some of the best tactical teams in the world. When you attack a Harrison family member, you're not just dealing with federal law enforcement, you're dealing with resources that most small countries can't match. Jake was speaking into his own communication device. All Coast Guard units coordinate with Phoenix Squadron. Priority 1 is civilian protection. Priority 2 is securing the Harrison family assets. More explosions echoed through the building, followed by the rapid chatter of automatic weapons fire. But this time, it sounded different, more organized, more professional, like a military operation rather than a chaotic firefight. Agent Rodriguez was monitoring multiple communication channels on her equipment. Phoenix Squadron has neutralized hostile positions on floors 6 through 9. Coast Guard tactical teams are clearing the lower levels. Estimated hostile casualties, 7 confirmed, unknown number retreating. What about Charlotte? Where is she in all this? Before anyone could answer, the elevator suddenly lurched to life with a mechanical grinding sound that echoed through the shaft. The elevator platform we were standing on began to vibrate as the elevator car descended toward us from somewhere above. Jake immediately raised his weapon. That elevator should be on emergency lockdown. Someone's overridden the safety protocols. Admiral Harrison pulled out his satellite phone again. Phoenix Control, we need immediate extraction from service shaft B7. Potential hostile approach via elevator car. Negative, Admiral. All hostiles on upper floors have been neutralized or are in retreat. The elevator car contains a single non-combatant requesting to communicate. The elevator car came into view, descending slowly with its lights on and doors partially open. Through the gap, I could see Charlotte standing inside, her hands raised in what looked like surrender, but her expression was anything but defeated. Rebecca, Charlotte called out as the elevator stopped at our level, I think it's time we talked, just the 2 of us, like sisters should. Jake moved to position himself between Charlotte and our family. Not happening. You've got about 30 seconds before Phoenix Squadron breaches that elevator car and extracts you for federal questioning.
Oh, Jake, always the protective husband. Charlotte's voice carried that familiar note of condescension, mixed with something much darker. But you don't understand the situation. None of you do. She stepped out of the elevator car slowly, keeping her hands visible, but there was something in her posture that suggested she wasn't nearly as cornered as she appeared. The chemical weapons network I've been working with, the international conspiracy that your federal friends are so excited about, it was never real, Rebecca. It was a cover story, a distraction to keep everyone focused on the wrong threat. Agent Rodriguez kept her weapon trained on Charlotte. Explain. My real employers don't manufacture chemical weapons for international terrorists. They manufacture pharmaceutical products for legitimate medical companies, and they've been very interested in developing new compounds for pediatric applications. The implications of what she was saying hit me like a physical blow. You mean
I mean that Emma wasn't poisoned as part of some elaborate revenge plot. She was poisoned as part of a clinical trial. An unauthorized clinical trial, but a clinical trial nonetheless. Admiral Harrison's face went white with rage. You used my granddaughter as a test subject for experimental drugs? I used Emma to test a compound that will eventually save thousands of children's lives. The neurotropic agent that caused her seizures, it's designed to identify and treat rare genetic disorders before they cause permanent developmental damage. Emma's reaction provided crucial data about dosage thresholds and safety margins. Jake was speaking urgently into his communication device. Phoenix Control, I need immediate medical consultation. Potential ongoing chemical exposure to an 8-month-old infant. But Charlotte wasn't finished. The other children who died weren't victims of murder, Rebecca. They were unfortunate casualties of a research program that will eventually revolutionize pediatric medicine. And Emma is going to help us perfect the treatment that will make sure no other children have to die. By kidnapping her? Agent Rodriguez demanded. By continuing her treatment. The compound she was exposed to requires follow-up doses to prevent long-term neurological damage. Without proper medical intervention over the next 72 hours, she'll develop permanent cognitive impairment. The words hit me like ice water. You're lying. I'm a pharmaceutical researcher, Rebecca. I know exactly what that compound does to developing brain tissue, and I know that the only place Emma can receive the antidote treatment she needs is at the research facility where we've been developing the cure. Jake raised his weapon. Even if that's true, we'll find other medical options. We're not turning Emma over to you. There are no other medical options. The antidote hasn't been approved by any regulatory agency, and it's not available through any legitimate medical channel. The only way to save Emma's cognitive development is to come with me now. Admiral Harrison was typing rapidly on his satellite phone. Phoenix Medical, I need immediate consultation with the world's best pediatric toxicologists. Priority Alpha emergency. But as we stood there in the elevator shaft with the sounds of combat fading above us and Charlotte making claims that could be sophisticated manipulation or terrifying truth, Emma began to show signs of distress again. Her breathing became irregular, her color started to change, and she made soft sounds that reminded me horribly of the night she'd been poisoned. Whether Charlotte was telling the truth about the antidote or not, something was definitely wrong with my daughter. Rebecca, Charlotte said quietly, you can hate me for the rest of your life. You can have me arrested, prosecuted, executed for all I care. But right now, Emma needs medical treatment that only exists in one place. And every minute you spent debating this decision is a minute her brain tissue is deteriorating. Jake was getting medical consultation through his communication device. Pediatric toxicology confirms possibility of delayed neurological effects from synthetic compounds. Recommend immediate comprehensive neurological assessment. Agent Rodriguez lowered her weapon slightly. What exactly are you proposing? Medical transport to the research facility, full Coast Guard and federal escort, complete transparency about the treatment protocols. Emma gets the antidote, you get to monitor every aspect of her care, and I surrender for prosecution when she's stabilized. Admiral Harrison was typing rapidly on his satellite phone. Phoenix Medical, I need immediate consultation with the world's best pediatric toxicologists. Priority Alpha emergency. But as we stood there in the elevator shaft, with the sounds of combat fading above us and Charlotte making claims that could be either sophisticated manipulation or terrifying truth, Emma began to show signs of distress again. Her breathing became irregular, her color started to change, and she made soft sounds that reminded me horribly of the night she'd been poisoned. Whether Charlotte was telling the truth about the antidote or not, something was definitely wrong with my daughter. Jake made the choice for all of us. Phoenix Medical, prepare for emergency medical transport. Destination to be determined. Full tactical escort. Maximum security protocols. He looked at Charlotte with an expression of absolute hatred. If you're lying about any of this, if this is some elaborate kidnapping scheme, I will personally make sure you spend the rest of your life in solitary confinement. And if I'm telling the truth,
Emma will grow up to be a perfectly normal, healthy little girl who happens to have contributed to medical research that will save countless other children. An hour later, we were in a Coast Guard medical helicopter flying over the Pacific coastline toward a research facility that existed in legal gray areas between legitimate pharmaceutical development and unauthorized human experimentation. Emma was connected to monitoring equipment, operated by military medical personnel, while Charlotte sat in restraints being guarded by federal agents. Admiral Harrison was coordinating with multiple agencies to ensure the facility would be surrounded by enough firepower to level a city block if necessary.
And I was holding my daughter's hand, watching her vital signs, and praying that the most important decision of my life hadn't just condemned her to something worse than death. The facility, when we reached it, looked like a combination of cutting-edge medical center and maximum security prison. Charlotte's antidote treatment worked exactly as she'd promised. Emma's neurological responses stabilized, her color improved, and within 6 hours, she was back to her normal, healthy baby self. Charlotte was arrested the moment Emma's treatment was complete. She was charged with unauthorized human experimentation, reckless endangerment of children, conspiracy with foreign agents, and 17 counts of murder related to the other families she destroyed. The International Chemical Weapons Network was entirely fictional, a cover story Charlotte had created to make herself seem like a small part of a larger conspiracy rather than the mastermind of a rogue medical research program. But the antidote was real, the research was real, and Emma's recovery was complete. 6 months later, I was feeding Emma her morning bottle in our new home, a secure compound in Northern California that Admiral Harrison had designed specifically to protect his family from any future threats. Emma was walking now, babbling in complex patterns that sounded almost like conversation, and showing no signs of developmental delays from her poisoning. Charlotte was arrested the moment Emma's treatment was complete. She was charged with unauthorized human experimentation, reckless endangerment of children, conspiracy with foreign agents, and 17 counts of murder related to the other families she destroyed. The International Chemical Weapons Network was entirely fictional, a cover story Charlotte had created to make herself seem like a small part of a larger conspiracy rather than the mastermind of a rogue medical research program. But the antidote was real, the research was real, and Emma's recovery was complete. 6 months later, I was feeding Emma her morning bottle in our new home, a secure compound in Northern California that Admiral Harrison had designed specifically to protect his family from any future threats. Emma was walking now, babbling in complex patterns that sounded almost like conversation and showing no signs of developmental delays from her poisoning. Charlotte was serving life in federal prison without possibility of parole. The other families she'd destroyed finally had answers about their children's deaths, and the unauthorized research program she'd been running was shut down permanently. Jake had returned to active duty, Admiral Harrison had implemented new security protocols for all Coast Guard families, and Agent Rodriguez had been promoted for her handling of what became known as the Harrison family case. As I watched Emma play in the morning sunlight streaming through bulletproof windows, I realized that some kinds of evil are so sophisticated, so carefully disguised as good intentions, that the only way to defeat them is with overwhelming force and absolute determination to protect the people you love. My sister had tried to turn my daughter into a research subject, had murdered innocent children in the name of medical advancement, and had nearly destroyed our family through her calculated cruelty. But she'd failed. Emma was safe, justice had been served, and our family was stronger than it had ever been. Sometimes love really is stronger than evil. Sometimes the good guys win. And sometimes, when you attack the wrong family, you discover that some people have resources you never imagined and determination you can't break. Charlotte learned that lesson too late, but she learned it completely. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.